Now, back to Raising the Bar. Call into the show with your stories and questions at 804-454-1366. 804-454-1366.
We are back to Raising the Bar, Greater RVA's Law Talk radio show. This is Colleen Quinn, your host and producer. I'm an attorney with Locke & Quinn. And with me today are Marty Wegbite of the Central Virginia Legal Aid Society and Ally Fannon of the Greater Richmond Bar Foundation. And we are talking about access to legal services, something that everybody needs but not everybody can afford. So this is a really important topic. Right before the break, I was talking to Ally about the Greater Richmond Bar Foundation and all of the amazing programs that they do. And Ally, what do you do at the Greater Richmond Bar Foundation?
Well, I'm the executive director. We are a small staffed organization. There's myself and my director of administration, Allison Rusi. So we do it all.
A staff of two.
A staff of two. But we have an incredible board of directors that are involved with our programs. We have great collaboration with Firms and Service Richmond, which is a collaboration of 11 law firms and 2 law departments that come together to promote pro bono service. And so we really kind of extend our capacity through our volunteerism. But at Greater Richmond Bar Foundation, I pretty much help develop the programs and help drive the mission focus.
And I know recently there's been a big push to try to recruit more lawyers. You mentioned before the break that the Greater Richmond Bar Foundation has a program for nonprofit associations, an area we don't always think about. We don't always think about how nonprofits who are doing so much good out there actually can't always afford legal services. So that's an area of need. And then you also mentioned the Veterans Program, which is a relatively new program, but has great outreach to help out Virginia's veterans. And then you mentioned recruiting attorneys. Can you talk a little bit more about what the Greater Richmond Bar Foundation is doing to recruit attorneys to basically help out and fill in some of those areas that Marty and his team can't get to?
Sure. Well, I myself am an attorney also. So when I go out to recruit attorneys, I try to put it in their perspective that they will understand, which is, how is this going to impact my time? Can I do it? I don't want to look like a fool, so please help me not do that. And, reconnecting them with what I believe is the inner drive that sent people to law school, which is a desire to help people. And so I think of our job as kind of packaging this experience and motivating lawyers to make that effort to cram in yet another thing into a very busy day. We all have that. We're doing, raising families, we're working, doing extracurricular things. So that's what we're doing.
Right. And we've got a caller. We've got Sally from Richmond calling in. And so, Sally, we'll put you on the air here.
Oh, hello. Good morning.
Good morning. You're on the air, Sally. You've got a question for our show. Thank you for calling in.
Oh, yeah. I was just wondering, just listening to the talk about the pro bono work and the people who are under the poverty level. Does that mean someone who's not, can I get a free consultation with an attorney? I always thought that all consultations were free.
That is a great question, Sally, because it pretty much depends on the type of case that you've got. For example, as Marty indicated before, Central Virginia Legal Aid Society doesn't take certain cases that they know other attorneys out there will handle. For example, auto accident type cases and personal injury cases are usually done on a contingency basis, and so oftentimes there's a free consultation done by most private lawyers that are out there doing that kind of work, like we do at Locke & Quinn. But then there are other areas of the law that don't always lend themselves to a free consultation. There are certain areas like divorce where some attorneys might do a free consultation, but others charge. And Marty, why don't you talk a little bit too about the types of cases that might lend themselves to a free consultation versus the others that don't, and then the ones that people pretty much, if they don't meet your poverty standards, are going to have to go pay an attorney to do?
Well, the first thing people have to do is to qualify to get any type of legal advice or consultation from legal aid. We are, as I said, federally, state and local funded, and we have to follow regulations. And one of those regulations is we can't give any type of assistance to somebody unless they first qualify financially. So you pretty much have to get in the door and be, as I said, amongst the poorest of the poor for us to be able to give you any type of consultation or advice at all. If you are under the poverty guidelines, and we can provide you assistance. If you aren't, then you have to go elsewhere. I mentioned at the top of the show places on the website where you can get at least information. There's that virginia.freelegalanswers.org that you can get an actual answer. There's one other source I did not mention, which is the Virginia Lawyer Referral Service, which is run by the Virginia State Bar. And you can call them. You just look them up on the internet, do a Google search, and they will refer you to a private attorney who has registered for that service, and you will be charged a referral fee of $35. That entitles you to half an hour consultation with the attorney to whom you have been referred, who concentrates his or her practice in that particular area of law. So it's not free, but $35 for a half an hour consultation is way below the market that you would customarily pay an attorney. So that is a source of not free, but very low cost consultation.
So they would be able to tell me if I had a case, is what, for $35, or
well,
is that
they certainly
would determine?
Well, they certainly could give you legal advice based on your facts and the law, and whether this is something you should pursue or not. And then, of course, if you want to pursue it with that particular attorney, then that would be between you and that attorney, or you could go elsewhere. What the $35 referral fee entitles you to, though, is a half an hour of the lawyer's time.
And that's a great resource. So, Sally, most lawyers in the Richmond area, you charge anywhere from about $150 an hour on up to even $600 an hour, depending on depending on the level of expertise and the area of the law. So when Marty mentions $35 for 30 minutes, that's an amazing deal. And usually in 30 minutes, most attorneys can give you a pretty good idea of where you might stand in whatever that type of case is, whether it's a divorce or landlord-tenant matter, or it's a lemon law dispute, that sort of thing. There are lawyers out there too in other areas of the law who sometimes they'll give a free consultation, but the program mentioned by Marty is probably a really good deal and a good place to start. So, Sally, did that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Great. Well,
thank you, everyone.
Thank you for calling into the show.
Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. So right before we took Sally's question, I was talking to Ally, and Ally was talking about how she goes about recruiting lawyers to do pro bono work. And you were talking, Ally, about the feel-good that lawyers can get. I know that one of the pro bono cases my firm handled was a case where a child had been born at home and didn't have a birth certificate. And, of course, they were trying to enroll him in school. And it was really interesting because we had to try to get some sort of medical person to certify as to the birth, and there had been no midwife or anybody at the birth. It was a pretty complicated case, but for people that couldn't even afford to get to a hospital to deliver their child, and this child was now 8 years old, but when we finally got the birth certificate for that little boy who really had no identity up to that point, it was really a rewarding case. So getting attorneys to do those cases, and then if you just do one and you've got that feel good, it's a great way to get them to do a few more.
Agreed, absolutely.
So what is the funniest case that you've had at Greater Richmond Bar Foundation?
Ooh, well, I don't know if we do funny. Nonprofit and veteran issues aren't typically too funny. I'm trying to think. In my own personal career, I've had quite a few funny because I worked for the city. But
I bet.
Yeah, I definitely, to me, it's. I'm going to fail on this question because I haven't had to have a case that was funny.
No failing on any questions.
There was no funny recently.
How about the cases or the areas that Greater Richmond Bar Foundation is having the most impact?
Well, for sure in the nonprofit sector, which, we have recently launched a new program where we are training lawyers that ordinarily do law that's outside of courts, so transactional work, into how to help guide nonprofits in their everyday business and stay clear of, possible pitfalls, make sure that they keep their 501c status. And so we've been working a lot with that, and we call it the General Counsel Program, with a focus on nonprofits who help low-income individuals as their mission, or help develop low-income communities as their mission. So where we see we connect lawyers to nonprofits to help them, we're saving those nonprofits dollars that they can spend then on their direct services. So we really like that nexus. I think that's one of the places that we've probably had the greatest impact. But we have just recently, finally, I'll look over at Marty because this has been a project we have worked on for 6 years, been partnering with legal aid and technology development people for about 6 years, 6 years. And we launched a great product called Justice Server, which we call Justice Server 2.0. That is a technology platform for legal aid to use inside their offices to really help them organize their cases better, and to also connect to volunteers in a portal, which is just a lot of web talk for match.com for lawyers and cases, putting people together with cases. And so that's been a great project. I think that's going to have an amazing impact. We were able to get a grant from Salesforce.org from San Francisco and an international pool of contestants because of the social impact legal aid could have and how this technology could really help move the needle. And this technology is going to be shared nationwide.
Wow. And in conjunction with that technology, I think you did a training launch, which I attended, and have about 12 different areas now where you have lawyers trained or training in those areas. I know I attended the session on protective orders, which is an area that Lock and Quinn works in with its women's issues focus. And in addition, I volunteered to assist with the pro bono adoption and birth certificate amendments. But those are just two areas. I know there are a whole slew of other areas. You've got immigration, and if you could list a few more.
Sure. Well, one of the more common demands that everyone really needs to get through is the divorce.
Yes.
And it really helps set people up for their next stage of life and get their credit straight and allow them to really move on with their lives. And legal aid definitely has many requests for divorce, and they have carved out a particular kind of divorce, no fault divorce, that is really excellent for lawyers, volunteers to do. It's not very time consuming, but it is very helpful for those people who are trying to navigate a court system, pleadings, paperwork. And so we've really partnered for a long time with legal aid on the no-fault divorce and have really made some great impact there. But that was one of them.
I know bankruptcy is another one that people
Right.
confront.
Bankruptcy. We also have an expansion in the Social Security area. So Social Security disability and Social Security supplemental income. We have the wage and labor issues that we're trying to expand, and preliminary protective order obviously is a critical one, and really good for attorney volunteers to help as well with those hearings.
I know that all those areas that Greater Richmond Bar Foundation has identified are definitely those areas of super need that folks have and can't always afford the legal services. So Marty, let's switch back over to you. What are some of the problems that Central Virginia Legal Aid Society confronts regularly with getting access to legal services? I mean, what difficulties do you have in terms, I guess a better way of articulating that is, what difficulties do you have in terms of trying to get all of the needs met of all the people that are contacting you? And how do you filter through those people, and how do you prioritize?
Well, that's a good question, Colleen.
Well, it was actually like 4 questions.
I'll try to deal with all of them at once.
Thank you.
So it is difficult because we have many more requests for legal assistance than we have attorneys and resources to fulfill them. And of the people who contact legal aid who do qualify for our services, probably 4 out of 5, all we're able to do is to give them legal advice as opposed to actual representation. Again, statistics I quoted earlier, 168,000 low-income people in our 5 cities and 15 counties, and we have 10 lawyers on staff. And this sort of plays into what I think are some of the myths that go around the law. People think you have a right to a lawyer in a civil non-criminal case. That's not true. You only have a right to a lawyer in a criminal case. Secondly, most people think, well, most folks have lawyers in civil non-criminal cases. In fact, most folks don't. And thirdly, folks think, well, you may not need a lawyer in court. The judge will, look after your interest and will sort of protect you. Well, that's not true either. In fact, I was in court yesterday and the judge said, once I put on this black robe, I can't give anybody any legal advice. If I start doing that, they're going to take this robe away from me. And having a lawyer is super important because studies have been done statewide, nationally for years that shows that you're anywhere between 2 and 4 times more likely to have a favorable outcome if you have a lawyer than if you don't. So, we try as much as we can to provide representation in the crucial areas. In the less crucial areas, we give advice, and we do get a great deal of help from volunteer lawyers doing it for free, pro bono. Things like bankruptcies, protective orders for victims of domestic abuse, wills, powers of attorney, some housing cases, things of that nature. And as Ally mentioned, this new project is hoping to expand that into other areas like housing repair and security deposit recovery and what we call wage theft, people simply working and not getting paid for working. So we have great hopes for that project as well.
So, Marty, you hit upon something which is really a good point. Sally's question before asked about, when can you expect free consultation, that sort of thing. But there's a lot of mystery sometimes about when somebody's entitled to an attorney versus not entitled to attorney. And you mentioned that in the criminal area, attorneys are provided when somebody has been accused of a crime. So that is an area that the state picks up the cost of the attorney. And then there are a few other small areas where the state will pick up the cost of an attorney or a guardian ad litem, which is another fancy name for a court-appointed attorney in certain situations. So, for example, where somebody is facing possible termination of their parental rights in an involuntary termination proceeding, typically an attorney will be appointed. And then in other cases where somebody is under a disability, they might be under age 18, is considered under a disability in Virginia, which is kind of a strange concept. But also if somebody is convicted of, is in prison under a felony, and they might be having a divorce action brought against them, they actually can be appointed a guardian ad litem as well. So there are certain situations, or if somebody is actually under a disability, a mental disability, sometimes the court will go ahead and appoint a guardian ad litem. But there still are, besides the criminal and those that I kind of laid out, there really are very few areas where somebody is entitled to get a court-appointed attorney.
That's correct, Colleen. And the exceptions that you pointed out are the exceptions that prove the rule, that in almost all civil cases, there's no right to have an attorney. So you can lose your income, your property, custody of your children, your health care, your housing, the home you're buying. You can lose everything because of a court action where the other side was represented and you were not represented simply because you could not afford an attorney. And that goes straight, I think, to the heart of the American system of justice. The Constitution of the United States, the preamble says, quote, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity." If you noticed the second item in that list, ahead of ensure domestic tranquility, ahead of provide for the common defense, the second item in that list is establish justice. And school children in this country, the end of the Pledge of Allegiance every day say, with liberty and justice for all. We all said it, we all continue to say it, and yet we are still very far away from establishing justice for all.
That is such a critical point. Thank you so much for sharing that, Marty, because we three sitting here are all lawyers, and we know what an advantage it is for somebody to have a lawyer in a case versus somebody to not have a lawyer. And for somebody to go what's called pro se, which is by themselves, without a lawyer. I don't know the exact Latin interpretation of it, but basically, you might know the Latin interpretation, Marty, but I'm looking at you. Do you?
I don't.
Okay. But I bet if we were able to look it up, I think it would come pretty close to by yourself or without a lawyer, that sort of thing. But somebody going pro se is at a distinct disadvantage, where the person on the other side, the landlord or the spouse that's getting the divorce, does have a lawyer. So really talking to both of you today about it is really not just about access to legal services, it's about access to justice.
It is, and that reminds me of something that University of Michigan football coach Jim Harbaugh said recently, and he's a sports guy.
Well,
he's not a legal guy.
You know that my husband and I have tickets to U of M football. You must.
I did not know that, but now I do. Thank you for sharing that. But as I say, Jim Harbaugh is a sports guy. He is not a legal guy, but he got very interested in this area, and he said, sending somebody into court without an attorney when the other side has an attorney is if I were to send my football team out onto the field without helmets and the other side had helmets. That's how bad the disparity is.
Well, go blue. That is near and dear to my heart, to know that came out of Jim Harbaugh's mouth. But that is such a true statement. And it really does put somebody at a disadvantage not to have an attorney, because the three of us sitting here know that the legal rules can be so complicated and can trap people if they don't understand the laws of evidence and the laws of civil procedure. And
even as an attorney, you don't want to be up against a side that's not represented, because it's very uneven playing field, and it's hard to move around in that.
You're right, Ally. It's so difficult when I've got somebody on the other side that's pro se, because I want to educate them and help them, and it's very difficult. And you feel like they are at a disadvantage in that regard. So we will be wrapping up here shortly, and we are talking about access to justice today with Marty Wegbite of the Central Virginia Legal Aid Society and Ally Fannon of the Greater Richmond Bar Foundation. We only have a few more minutes left. If anybody does want to call into the show at 804-454-1366. Again, 804-454-1366. So, Marty, let's go back to you. Tell me maybe about the most heartbreaking thing that you've encountered.
I can't narrow it down to one, but just in general, I think the most heartbreaking thing is when people contact legal aid too late and there's really nothing that can be done to fix their situation. This often happens if somebody already has a judgment against them, the appeal period has passed, the time to file a motion to rehear has passed, and people think, well, don't I get a second chance? Well, actually, no, you don't. If you get court papers, or even if you get something that threatens taking you to court, you need to get some type of legal advice and legal assistance, even if it is from Virginia.Free Legal Answers or from Legal Aid if you qualify financially, or the Virginia Lawyer Referral Service. You really need to take prompt legal action if you are taken to court or threatened with court. The other thing that's really heartbreaking is if people rely on non-legal sources. They will say, well, so-and-so told me this, or I heard that. And unless it came from a lawyer who is licensed by the Virginia State Bar, you cannot rely on it. You cannot rely upon what the guy at the pizza parlor tells you. In fact, we have a deal with all the pizzerias in the Richmond area, which is we don't make pizza and they don't practice law.
That's a really, really good point. Don't rely on legal advice unless it comes from a lawyer. So in the few remaining minutes, let's talk about some of the programs you're doing to fundraise. Ally, I know you've got Jazz for Justice coming up, and Marty, I know that you all do Justice for Ale. So Ally, tell us a little bit about Jazz for Justice.
Sure. Thank you, Colleen. Our next 4th annual Jazz for Justice will be February 9th, 2018. You can find ticket information and more information on our website, which is www.grbf.org. And it is a co-venture with VCU Jazz Department, and we fundraise for access to legal services and for VCU Jazz scholarships. And it's a great night of seeing students doing what they love, bringing attorneys out into an environment that is not all about court and controversy, and celebrating the community. And I encourage everyone to kind of consider going to that.
It's a great fundraising event for a really good cause. And I know, Marty, that the Central Virginia Legal Aid Society pairs up to do Justice for Ale as well in the summertime. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's usually in May at one of the local breweries. It has been at Hardywood Craft Brewery. It was most recently at Champion Brewing. And again, we make this information available to the public on our website. CVLAS also has a Facebook page, so you can learn about what's happening just by simply going to Facebook and just searching for Central Virginia Legal Aid Society, and you can find out what we're doing. But one thing I will say, please do not try to get legal assistance through Facebook. You will just get an automatic message that will direct you to our website that tells you who to contact and how to contact and the days and hours of intake.
So a couple of takeaways as we are almost wrapping up our show here is to make sure you get legal advice from an attorney and a reliable source. And we're going to put all those sources that Marty has mentioned throughout the show up on our Raising the Bar Law Talk website. And also make sure you get legal services sooner rather than later. So thank you for joining us today, Marty and Ally. It's been a fabulous show with lots of good information.
There are many, many questions, but the answer is AM 820, WNTW Chester.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomas. President Trump is in China. Trade and North Korea topping the agenda.
White House officials view the China visit as the centerpiece of the president's 12-day tour of Asia. Mr. Trump will be pushing China on trade and North Korea. The president is unhappy about the U.S. trade imbalance with China, but he's been careful not to anger the Chinese in hopes that Beijing will help confront the threat posed by the North Korean government.